Hello viewers, welcome to my channel. I am Hasham Ali Khan. Previous videos I have explained you regarding the registration under GST. So what is the process of registration, what is the provisions regarding cancellation of registration and suspension of registration, all these things I have explained in the previous videos. In this video I am going to discuss you two topics, that is transition to GST and tax invoice or invoicing. These two topics I am going to explain you, so watch the video till the end. So before starting the video, take a screenshot of the points I have written on the board regarding transition to GST and invoicing. Then I'll explain all the points. Now, the first topic is regarding the transition to GST. Actually, GST is a single tax. Before applying this GST, there were multiple indirect taxes like sales tax, service tax, excise duty, so many different types of taxes. Multiple taxes are there. Now, by implementing this GST, all the indirect taxes are merged into one single tax, that is called GST. So, transition to GST, it is nothing but converting the earlier multiple taxes into a single tax called GST. So, GST is a major reform. First of all, last few years back, the government has implemented GST. It's a major reform in the indirect taxes that aims to replace the multiple indirect taxes with a single tax. So instead of having multiple indirect taxes, our aim is to convert it into a single tax. That means there is a transition from old multiple taxes to a new single tax. Thus, businesses which were required to collect and then pay different types of taxes such as excise duty, sales tax, were required to shift to GST. So earlier, before implementing this GST, the dealers used to collect the different types of indirect taxes from the customers. And these taxes have to be paid to the concerned departments. That was the procedure earlier. Now all the people have to convert that system into a new system, that is called GST. This is called transition from the old multiple system to the new single system called GST. That is transition of GST. Now, process of transition. How the old taxes will be converted. For example, a person is already covered. He was collecting the taxes, collecting multiple taxes and paying to the concerned authority. Now everybody have to convert, have to transit from old system to new system. So what is the procedure? What are the steps? Three steps or four steps. Totally 4 steps are there for converting, for transmission from old to new. The first, all the existing central excise, service tax, SSCs and VAT dealers are required to convert to GST. So all the people who were covered under excise duty, sales tax, VAT, all these dealers have to convert it, shift it to the GST method. Now the following process needs to be followed. So whoever person who want to convert from old system to new system has to follow the following 4 steps. The first step is enrollment. A person who is having multiple taxes, now first of all he has to go to the portal. A common portal is there for GST. So in that portal he has to enroll. He has to validate his email and mobile number. So first step, go to the portal, then submit your mobile number, your email address, so that it will be validated. So all taxpayer registered under excise, VAT, service tax, etc. need to enroll themselves on the common portal. First step, they have to enroll. They have to go to the common portal of GST and then by validating their email ID or mobile number. There he has to apply the email or mobile number. Then second step, provisional registration. Once enrollment is done, the next step is he will get a provisional registration number, right? GSTIN. On enrollment, the taxpayer will get a provisional certificate of registration through form GST REG 25. Remember, provisional certificate they can get from this form, GST REG 25, which contains the GSTIN, identification number. GST identification number he will get. This number is very important. So a taxpayer having multiple registrations under a previous law will be granted a single GSTIN on the basis of single PAN, because everybody will have only one PAN. On a single PAN, one GSTIN will be allotted, and this one GSTIN will be enough for all the earlier taxes. Now he is bound only to one tax, that is GST. Now submission of documents. After getting this provisional registration, the next step is submission of the documents and other information required by GST. So if the person is liable to be registered under GST, the criteria when a person is liable to be registered, already previous video I have explained you under what circumstances a person is compulsorily liable to be registered, and what are the criteria given, like 20 lakh or 10 lakh aggregated turnover. In that case, every person has to get registered under GST. So if a person is liable to register under GST or wishes to voluntarily register under GST, such person shall submit an application. So even if a person is not bound to be registered, but voluntarily he wants to get himself registered, so these people, such person shall submit an application electronically. No need to go to the department. Online, electronically he can do by submitting the form GST REG 26. So GST REG 26 is the form for submitting the information, submitting the details, documents, and along with necessary information and documents. In this form, he has to supply all the information, all the documents he has to upload. The 3 steps we have completed. The first step is enrollment or validating the email address and mobile number. Second, getting the provisional registration and getting GSTIN. Then third one is regarding submission of documents through the form GST REG 26. Last step is final registration. If the information provided is correct and complete, final GST registration will be given from form number GST REG 06. GST REG 06, this is the form for final registration. So after getting all the documents, after getting all the information, the proper officer will scrutinize and check whether everything is in order or not. If completely everything is in order, then he will register. He will give the final registration. So, however, if the information provided is not correct or is incomplete, the provisional registration might be cancelled. But after giving the person a show cause notice and reasonable opportunity of being heard, without being heard, the proper officer cannot cancel the registration. First of all, if the application is incomplete or wrong data is given, then an opportunity should be, a show cause notice should be given by the proper officer to the applicant that these are the information which is not correct. Supply the necessary information, will make the final registration. If he is unable to submit the complete information, then only the proper officer can cancel the registration. Otherwise, he should be given, the applicant should be given a reasonable opportunity of being heard. So these are the 4 steps in the process of transition from the old system to new system of GST. Now, one point you have to remember, if a person is required to migrate to GST but does not do so, for example, a person is already registered under multiple taxes earlier. Now it is compulsory for him to transit from old system to new system. It is compulsory, mandatory. But if he has not done that, then what will happen? He will not be eligible to claim input tax credit. Input tax credit is the backbone of GST. By using this input tax credit, the tax liability will get reduced. The tax liability will get reduced. So it is beneficial for the business to get this benefit of input tax credit. But if a person has not registered under GST, he cannot be able to claim the input tax credit. Apart from that, the person is liable for penalty, subject to a penalty. Not only he is not eligible for getting the input tax credit, but also the person is liable for huge penalty if he has not converted from old system to GST. So these are the provisions you have to remember regarding the transition to GST. So in examination, question will be asked, explain the provisions regarding the transition to GST and what are the process, what are the steps involved in transition. The 4 steps I have explained. That is, first one, enrollment, second one, provisional registration, then submission of all the documents and information, then getting the final registration. That's it. Now the second topic in this video I'm going to explain you is about invoicing. This topic is also very important. Invoicing or tax invoice, right? So what do you mean by invoice? First of all, an invoice is a document which is issued by the supplier of goods or services to the recipient on the supply of goods and or services. When the supplier is supplying the goods or services, at the time an invoice, a document, should be raised by the supplier and given to the recipient. So in this invoice, in this document, he will specify what is the type of goods, what is the nature of the goods, what is the quantity, what is the price, how much is the tax. All the details regarding quantity, price and taxes are included in this invoice. And this invoice will be issued to the recipient of goods and services. So an invoice is a document containing the list of goods and or services supplied, along with the details of quantity and prices, adding taxes and any other charges, showing the total amount payable to the recipient of the invoice. Purchaser, the buyer, is the recipient. So supplier will issue the invoice to the recipient, buyer, showing the detail regarding quantity, price, taxes or any other charges. And this is the total which is payable by the recipient to the supplier. Now, as per the provisions of GST, an invoice needs to be raised by a registered person for all the goods and services. It's compulsory. For a registered dealer, for a registered person, it is compulsory for him that whenever the goods or services are provided, he has to make an invoice. Make an invoice. Now, the supplier, even if the recipient is not registered with the GST, one point you have to remember, the registered dealer must raise the invoice and given to the recipient, whether the recipient is a registered dealer or not. It is immaterial. It is immaterial whether the recipient is a registered dealer or not. Now, the invoice raised for the purpose of complying with the GST provision is called tax invoice. Now finally, invoice is a general term. Invoice is any document which is given by the supplier to the recipient. But tax invoice means the invoice which is prepared according to the provisions of GST. So any invoice according to the provisions of GST, that invoice will be called a tax invoice. Now, raising a tax invoice is mandatory under GST Act. So every supplier, every registered person, he must raise a tax invoice at the time of supply of goods and or services. It is mandatory, compulsory. Now, a tax invoice can only be raised by a registered taxable person of every supply of goods and services. So, every registered person must raise the tax invoice at the time of supply of goods or services. Now, contents of tax invoice. Normally, according to the provisions of GST Act, what are the items that are necessary to be written in the tax invoice? What are the contents of the tax invoice? The first one, name, address and GSTIN of the supplier. In the invoice, first of all, the name of the supplier, the address of the supplier and the GSTIN. GST identification number, that is a unique number which is allotted to every registered dealer. That GSTIN should be specified in the invoice. Secondly, a consecutive serial number unique for a financial year. So every invoice must have a unique number for that financial year. That means consecutive numbers should be there. There should not be missing invoices. The invoices should be in consecutive numbers. Thirdly, date of issue. Every invoice must bear the date on which the invoice is raised. Next one, name, address and GSTIN if registered of the recipient. If the recipient of the goods and services is a registered person, then what is the name and address of that recipient person also should be written in the invoice. Name and address of the recipient and address of delivery along with the name of the state and its code if such recipient is unregistered and where the value of taxable supply is 50,000 rupees or more. Suppose if the recipient is an unregistered person and the value of the goods supplied or value of services given is 50,000 rupees or more. In that case, compulsorily, the name of the recipient, the address of the recipient, and the name and address of the recipient and address of delivery, and the name of the state or union territory of the recipient should be written. So it is compulsory. I am the supplier. I have to see whether my recipient, to whomever I am supplying the goods, that person is registered or unregistered. If registered, compulsorily name and address and GSTIN of the supplier if registered. If unregistered, then we have to see how much is the value of the goods. If the value of the goods is 50,000 or more for unregistered person, then compulsorily the name, address and the state of delivery, place of delivery, that should be specified in the invoice. Next one, description of the goods and services. The details of the goods and services supplied, that should be specified. Quantity in case of goods. Quantity, how much goods have been supplied, that must be specified. Total value of supply of goods. When we multiply the quantity with price, we'll get the value. The complete value of the goods supplied must also be shown. Then taxable value of supply of goods or services after adjustment of discount, if any. Sometimes the discount will be allowed by the supplier to the recipient. So he has to deduct the discount and the net amount should be shown in the invoice. Lastly, finally, signature or digital signature of the supplier or his representative. So finally, the signature of the supplier or the digital signature of the supplier or his representative should be given in the invoice. So these are the contents of tax invoice I have explained. So in this video I have explained you about transition to GST. What is the process of transition to GST? What are the steps involved? 4 steps. Then I have explained you about invoicing. What is tax invoice? For whom it is compulsory? And then what are the contents of the tax invoice? These are the items to be shown in invoice. Inshallah, we will continue the next topic in the next video.